My brother called me a failure at my daughter's party until he learned my secret. I stood outside my parents' house, clutching the wrapped dollhouse and a bag of presents, feeling the cold February wind cut through me. The front porch was decked out with pink balloons and a glittery happy birthday sign for Lily. Laughter echoed from the backyard where the party was in full swing. My niece, the little sunshine of the family, was turning 7. I should have been excited to celebrate with her, but instead my stomach twisted in knots. I rang the doorbell hoping for a warm reception, but as soon as my mom saw me, her smile faded. "We don't want you here today," she said, and behind her, my brother Jacob stepped forward, smirking, as if he had already won some kind of victory. "This is no place for losers," he sneered, crossing his arms like he was the judge of my life. The words sliced through the cold air, making me feel small, insignificant, like a ghost in my own family. I froze. I had dealt with Jacob's mockery for years, but today it felt like a final slap in the face. I thought about all the times I had come through for them, silently bearing the burden of their expectations. I had helped Jacob pay for Lily's school fees just 6 months ago, without hesitation, when he couldn't make ends meet. And now today, I was the loser who didn't belong. I could feel the anger rise in me, the hot flush of embarrassment creeping up my neck, but I held it in. For once, I would stay calm, unaffected. I wasn't about to give them the satisfaction of seeing me crumble. "Fine," I said quietly, my voice barely above a whisper, but firm enough to hold my ground. I turned away and walked to my car, determined to leave. But as I reached the door, I hesitated. I glanced back through the front window. Inside, Lily was laughing in her birthday dress, surrounded by her friends. She had no idea what had just happened, and part of me didn't want to ruin her day. But then Jacob's mocking words echoed in my head again. "This is no place for losers." I tightened my grip on the gift bag, fighting the urge to burst into tears, and slammed the car door shut. I had given them everything. I had bent over backward to be the good sibling, the one who always showed up, who always supported them, and for what? To be told I wasn't good enough? To be treated like I didn't matter? Not this time. For the next 2 days, I stayed silent. No texts, no calls, just quiet. No guilt trips, no apologies. I had nothing to say. But on the 3rd day, I turned my phone on. It buzzed nonstop. 27 missed calls, 15 voicemails, 32 texts. It was a symphony of regret and panic. They were scrambling. They needed me. But one message stood out. It was from Kelly, Jacob's wife. She apologized and told me something I hadn't expected. Jacob had already spent more money than they had, hoping I would pick up the tab for the party. When I didn't, he had lost it. I could almost hear the panic in her voice through the text. Jacob had gambled away the family's money, hoping I'd bail him out. But this time I didn't. For once, I wasn't there to pick up the pieces. I let the silence stretch out. I wanted him to stew. I wanted him to feel what it was like to be truly alone. And for the first time, I didn't feel guilty about it. Later that evening, I drove past my parents' house. The birthday decorations were gone, the balloons deflated. Jacob's car still sat in the driveway, but his usual smugness was absent. Behind the curtains, I saw him pacing, no longer the cocky, arrogant man who had mocked me, but a desperate figure, trying to salvage what was left of his reputation. He was shouting, probably blaming me, because he couldn't comprehend why I wouldn't just do what I always did. Fix his mess. It felt good to see him like that. Later, Kelly reached out again. "Jacob's out of control," she said. "He has to sell his car to cover the party debt." The same Jacob who had mocked me for driving a used car now had to sell his overpriced luxury vehicle to cover his own mistakes. The irony wasn't lost on me. I couldn't stop laughing. I wanted to watch him squirm. So I did. I listened to the stories from Kelly of him struggling to make ends meet, of him blaming everyone else but himself. It was beautiful in its own way. He was finally experiencing the consequences of his actions. As weeks passed, the texts and calls from Jacob grew more desperate, more angry. He accused me of ruining his life. He said I was selfish, that I had no family loyalty. Each message was a reminder of how little he understood about what it meant to truly be a part of a family. Then one day, my doorbell rang. I opened the door, knowing exactly who it was. There stood Jacob, looking like a wreck. He was desperate, his hair messy, his face flushed with frustration. "You think this is funny?" he spat, his voice shaking. I leaned against the doorframe, my face betraying nothing but amusement. "I think it's hilarious," I said, the satisfaction bubbling up inside me. For once, I was in control. For once, I didn't need to fix everything for him. "I don't lend money," I said, staring him down, "but I give it to people who deserve it." His face fell. He looked like he'd just been struck in the chest. "You'll figure it out, champ," I added, smiling. I didn't need to say another word. I closed the door in his face, the finality of it ringing in my ears. Weeks went by with no word from Jacob. The silence was sweet, but then my mom called. "We need to talk," she said, her voice strained. Of course it was about Jacob. He was struggling again, and of course, she wanted me to fix it. But this time I wasn't having it. "You didn't care about me when Jacob shut me out," I said, my voice cold. "You stood by while he humiliated me. Now that he's suffering, you want to act like family again?" The silence on the other end of the phone was deafening. "No, Mom," I said firmly. "I'm not coming." And for the first time in my life, I hung up first. I thought that was the end of it, but Jacob, predictable as always, came to my door again, even more desperate than before. "I just need a loan," he whispered, his eyes wide with fear. I smirked. "Let me guess. The GoFundMe didn't stretch as far as you thought." He flinched at the mention of the fundraiser. He was a mess, his pride broken, his dignity shattered. But that wasn't my problem anymore. "I don't lend money," I said, my voice firm, "but I give it to people who deserve it." I watched as his face twisted in frustration, and without saying another word, I shut the door. The last I heard, Jacob had found a job. It wasn't glamorous, but it was a paycheck that didn't come from me. It wasn't much, but it was enough to get him started on his own. 6 months passed and life became peaceful again. No more guilt trips, no more requests for money, no more surprise visits. But then doubt started creeping in. Was I too harsh? Was I punishing Lily for Jacob's mistakes? I decided to turn to Reddit, posting my dilemma in a thread called AETA for cutting off my entitled brother and parents. Even though it means my niece might suffer? The responses were clear. "You're not the asshole. Jacob had made his bed. Let him lie in it." But one comment stood out. "If you want to help Lily, set up a savings account for her. But don't let Jacob use her as leverage." It clicked. I didn't need to throw myself back into their toxic mess to help Lily. So I texted Kelly, "Hey, I want to help Lily, but not Jacob. Let's talk." And just like that, I had my answer. Now I had to ask myself, what would you do in my situation? Would you help Lily without letting Jacob take advantage again, or walk away completely and let them face the consequences of their actions? Let me know in the comments.